Well, good evening and welcome to tonight's Pub Theology. We're so glad that you are joining us here in the pub. I've got Ben with me, I've got Mike with me, and we've got Mr. Dr. Joey Schumann tuning in from his home down in the Milwaukee area. Is that right, Joey?
Appleton, actually.
Appleton. Oh, that's not too far away. Actually, you're just down the road. You could have come and joined us in the bar.
I know.
That would have been great. But we're really glad that you are joining us tonight for this edition of Pub Theology. This is, I think, one that a lot of people I'm seeing are really excited about. I hope that it's going to be a big benefit to people because we're going to be talking about the COVID vaccine. And I know that there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions, concerns, hopes, fears, maybe even about this. And we want to try and answer some of those. And especially what we want to do tonight is give you some questions that you can ask yourself, maybe a rubric for walking through to help yourself make the determination. Do I get this vaccine, and why do I get this vaccine, and when do I get this vaccine, and all of those things. And Dr. Joey Schumann is going to help us to answer some of those things, especially give us the medical professional side of this. Now, if you have never joined us for Pub Theology before, the way this works is we're here in a room together, we're talking about stuff, but we are looking forward to your questions, comments, thoughts. So please drop those in the comments on this Facebook video. We will try and answer your questions as we go along, but we do have some things we've already planned to talk about. So hopefully between those things, we'll have a really good conversation. This might go a little bit longer than our typical session. Normally we go about an hour, but we're going to maybe give this one the space to go as, answer questions as we need to. So we'll try not to make it spend, all night here, but because we want to respect Dr. Schumann's time and all of that. But he's shaking his head and he's saying, okay, no, we can just take up all of his time. All right.
Well, it's like the average Lutheran Ceili Orchestra service, man. It goes a little longer than an hour.
I remember that. Now, speaking of that, Dr. Schumann, before he was a family practice physician, he was the founder of a thing called the Lutheran Ceili Orchestra. But I'm going to let him talk more about that. Joey, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for us right now?
Yeah, sure. So just a note about the band. It was actually founded by Pastor Mark Jeske down at St. Marcus in Milwaukee. And I guess just to jump there, and then I'll kind of go back and introduce myself. But the band, the Lutheran Ceili Orchestra, was started back in the 90s down at St. Marcus, where once a year, Pastor Jeske would just kind of pull everybody out of the congregation who played anything kind of remotely Irish around St. Patty's Sunday, and they just do kind of a Irish sing-along service. And as a joke, they called themselves the Lutheran Ceili Orchestra, I think. And it got to be such a popular thing once a year that a couple of us decided to, offer it on the road to other Lutheran churches. And, now we've played all around the country kind of doing Celtic style music within kind of Lutheran liturgical worship kind of format. So it's been a blast. It's really fun. So, but that's the band. I am a family physician by day. It's my day job, and went to medical school down at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Graduated 2012, which I was just thinking today, I can't believe it was almost 10 years ago that I came out of medical school. Time flies. My residency in family medicine was through the University of Wisconsin system. Did that for 3 years. And we settled up in Appleton out of residency, partly because we had family roots, but partly because we honestly fell in love with the church up here, Emmanuel Lutheran out in Greenville. And so we built a house like a mile down the road from the church. My clinic is like 2 miles from the house. So I spent most of my life in this little 3 mile box outside of Appleton. I'm super happy to do so. So
you could do worse than to settle down in the place where there is, I think, the highest percentage per capita of WELS people is the Appleton kind of Fox Valley area. Pretty sure somebody told me that once, that's like the concentration. So
thank you for not saying the highest per capita COVID cases, which we also ran to our dismay a couple months ago. I think that was like October, November. Okay. It was pretty bad for a while, but yeah, Lutherans, we're plenty. Yeah.
Well, and the other is Thrivent representatives, right?
They
Like,
do, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's almost everybody in the Appleton area has their own, right? That's how many there are, or something like that.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, I just want to take a second to say hi to all the people that are saying hi in the chat there. We've got Christine, Barb, Cheryl, Courtney. There's 3 of you whose names start with C, and then there's Barb. But nice to see you guys. Thanks for joining us. Real quick, if you don't know who we are, if you've never watched Pub Theology, you're like, who are these other guys? Okay, we just met Dr. Schumann, but my name is Brandon. I'm the family minister at St. Mark in De Pere and Green Bay. We have 2 campuses in the Green Bay area. And then I'm also joined by 2 of my friends and associates on staff at St. Mark. Ben, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm the campus pastor at our Green Bay campus. Mike and I work a lot over there together, and then discipleship at St. Mark. So that kind of means helping people on their walk of faith figure out what's next, walk with them hand in hand, encourage them, cheerlead for them, and really walk alongside them. Again, Mike and I work a lot on that. And I've been here at St. Mark for about 2 years, a little over 2 years. I came from Boise, Idaho before that, and I'm a missionary's kid. So I've been all over the world, Thailand, China. My parents were in Antigua. So a little bit of everything, and glad to be here tonight.
Mike.
Yeah. Congregational life minister at St. Mark. I get to do life with people that are new, reach out to our guests and answer questions for them. A lot of other areas of ministry I'm part of, and love to worship lead those services at our Green Bay site and interact with people at our De Pere campus. Before that was Jesus Cares Ministries for about 7 years, and worked with special needs population nationwide, and really enjoyed that and opened my eyes to some really cool things.
Very cool. Very cool. And according to Susan in our comments here, you have lost a lot of weight since the last time she saw you.
I have lost weight,
so
yes.
That's really great to hear.
Maybe I'll gain it back one day.
Yeah, I'm just noticing that you've lost it mostly in the beard. If you've watched former episodes, Mike has had a longer beard before, but today he's sporting the short beard look, and I think it's looking pretty good on you, Mike.
I'm still getting used to it, but thank you.
Yeah. Is it a little bit colder?
It's a little colder, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Hey,
Thankfully, it's been mild.
before we get a little bit too far, I promised my wife tonight. Joey, I think you were involved in the recording of a song about a year ago, More Than Conquerors.
More Than Conquerors, yeah.
Yeah. I think you were the most listened to man in my house for a long time. So I appreciate your work on that.
Well, that's awesome. Well, hi once again to all of you who are chiming in the chat saying hi. And also hi to all of the crowd noise. If you can hear some of this background noise, man, this is the most full we've seen the Copper State Tap House in a long time, which I don't know. That's an interesting thing. So I'm glad for the business, though. John and Missy Martins, who we had on the show just a couple months ago, I'm sure they're appreciating the extra business. But stay safe, folks. Let's get to talking about the vaccine and all that stuff. Joey, I'm going to just kick this to you. Let's talk about the past year. What are your observations about COVID-19, the virus, the pandemic, how things have gone the past year from a doctor's perspective? Tell us about what's going on here.
From a doctor's perspective,
or from a dad's perspective, or just from a Christian man's perspective, whatever perspective you want to be, man.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of question, because those perspectives can be very different. Maybe I'll start with my doctor's perspective, and I'm going to try to kind of stick with that side of myself as much as possible, especially during the science portion of this tonight. This is a conversation that even in my clinic really gets pulled in a lot of different directions. When patients bring these questions up to me, many times it's really obvious that there's a bias or a political leaning, and that's kind of the direction they try and pull the conversation. So I think at this point I'm pretty well practiced on sticking to the science and trying to shut down the political side of it as much as I can. So I'll just say from a scientific standpoint, because I know we got a lot to talk about, I'll just leave it as simple as the last year has taught us scientifically that COVID is real. It's a real threat. The mortality rate is high enough to worry about. We can split hairs on it, but it's high enough to worry about. And the transmissibility rate is probably our biggest concern, because even a low mortality virus that is transmissible is a huge risk, not just to people, but we've seen even in Appleton here, our hospitals maxed out to the last bed, and the ICUs have been expanded 2-3 times over, just looking for corners to put bodies to get them treatments. And I think it's the side of this pandemic that most people don't really have an awareness of, and so maybe it's I don't blame them for not having that kind of in their psychology of this, their understanding of the pandemic. But and what's not helping too is it's kind of the age of the conspiracy, and kind of not having this kind of having a set point of just doubting what people are telling you, you know.
Yeah, there's a skepticism that's sort of fed almost by the fact that we can access anybody else's skeptical ideas too, right? Like anybody who has a wild idea has the ability to go and make a video, share it online, and anybody can share that video. And it's almost like the more wild the perspective, more shares it gets sometimes, right?
It is true, and that's come up in my clinic a lot. I have patients emailing me links to YouTube videos and stuff to see, you know, the latest person in scrubs and a white coat kind of giving their opinion on stuff. And I've started telling people, I'm not even going to watch it, right? I treat you based on published scientific data the same way I would treat my family. And you know, another thing the last year has taught me is the power of scrubs and a white coat, and how that is even getting abused to weight what an individual opinion might be. You know, you put on scrubs and a white coat and say what you are thinking, and it's got a lot more power maybe than the next person, even if you're wrong. And that's been something I've been chewing on. That's why I'm very intentionally planning my wardrobe with a plain black T-shirt here for you tonight. Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna add any false credentials by throwing on your scrubs before getting on the show with us tonight, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So obviously, as you said, you know, you're kind of in the thick of this as you're dealing with patients on a regular basis, hearing all their perspectives and so on. And I appreciate that you're approaching this saying, let's just talk about the science, because and from our perspective as guys who work in the church, I mean, you know, one of the things that always goes through my mind is I'm not qualified to decide if somebody shares a video with me that says, hey, listen to this one. I've just always been responding, you know what, I'm not qualified to determine whether or not that person is right. I just can't do that. But maybe what I can do is I can say, here's what God says about situations like this. And here's why I can trust him, and also try to do my best to listen to the people who do know. We've got a couple of good questions that have shown up already in the comments, and I'm going to grab just one of them because I think that it's related to what you were just talking about. There's another couple of them that will relate to later on, but Deb asks, what is the desired carrying capacity? So you mentioned before that our hospitals are kind of maxed out, that the hospitals in Appleton, there's no beds available. And she says, I'm betting empty hospital beds mean closed hospitals. So what's the desired carrying capacity? So can you comment just for a moment on that idea?
I'm not, is this the question? No, I can't see it. So I guess I'm not sure I totally understand. Am I being asked, if I'm being asked, what is the hospital bed capacity in Wisconsin? I guess I don't even know really off the top of my head, but that is published on the state COVID tracking website under the health department. They actually have an amazing website that breaks down the hospital beds per county and how many of them are occupied, and ICU beds and so on. And to clarify, I haven't looked in the last couple of weeks, but I don't think we are maxed out anymore. This was a couple months ago that it was really situation critical. But that's, I'm just saying, I don't know if the public really had much awareness necessarily of that.
Sure. And I'm thinking, as I'm kind of looking at Deb at your question, and maybe you could, Deb, in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe you're sort of reflecting that thought that that sometimes I've heard this that says that, well, you know, when people talk about hospitals being at max capacity, well, don't the hospital administrators want that because that's how they get money and that kind of thing? You know, there's part of their source of revenue. So is that necessarily a bad thing? Yeah. Maybe we could just kind of take a step back and understand what does it mean when a hospital is at max capacity, when it's not at max capacity? When you walk into a hospital under a normal situation, when there's not a pandemic going on, what is normal for the capacity at a hospital, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know if I could answer necessarily what's normal at a hospital for capacity. We don't really necessarily have goals for that, as far as I know, because that would be a pretty unethical goal to say, hey, I hope there's 50 people dying in our hospital. And I know that's not what she's asking, but you know, max capacity just means all the beds are full, you know, and that's it. We don't have more places to put people. And the hospitals have been, you know, trying to find ways of making more available beds, like opening up floors that generally aren't open for general admissions, and converting these other use beds into normal hospital rooms. So they're just kind of trying to add more places to put people. The problem is, you know, you can find corners to put people, but you can't push a button and get more doctors and nurses to staff these. Plus, when your doctors and nurses are getting exposed during more cases during the day, they start going down and they got to go into quarantine. Now you've got more people in beds in your building, less staff to take care of them. And that's not even to mention that your hospital may not have even stocked enough resources to manage these people, you know, protective gear and so on. That was a real problem for a while too. So I guess back to the question, I don't think there's really a goal percentage, and I don't get a sense from hospital administrators that they have a goal based on revenue for how many beds they want occupied at any time. But I'm not sure how else to answer that. I might be ignorant.
Sure. Well, that's all right, because I don't expect you to be an expert in hospital administration either, because my understanding, and you know, once again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I had a good friend back in Minnesota who was a hospital administrator, and he would often say, when it comes to the medicine, he'd say, I know nothing. I am not a doctor. He would say, don't ever ask me a medical question because I can't answer it. He said, on the other hand, don't ever ask one of my doctors a question about how to run this place, because they will look at you like a deer in the headlights. Yeah. So there's a big disparity between the two in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I guess I probably would venture to say that if we're being gracious to hospital administrators, we would trust that their goal is first and foremost to care for patients and to be focused on that.
Well, that's been one of the hardest things over the last year, I think, for doctors. Seeing doubt from the public that we are in this for something other than just making people healthy and better, right? That's been more draining, I think, than the day-to-day work that we do. Just the doubt that, I mean, I can speak for myself and a lot of good friends I know who came through medical school with me, that we have undergone an incredible amount of suffering so that we could get here and help people. I mean, if we were just in it for the money, I don't think that amount of sacrifice in our life would have really been worth it. It's just that's been a really rough part of it, I'd say. Just please, if you're watching this, understand that we really are working for you. We want you to be healthy. The things we recommend are really for safety based on data, and I just don't have any other motivation other than that.
Joe, I'm glad you said that. I had a conversation in a Bible study just this morning about, this was completely unrelated to COVID, but it was a topic of how do you make end of life decisions. And it's a Bible study with a lot of people who are kind of in that phase of life. They're trying to figure out, how do I finish out well, when that stroke comes or cancer comes, how do I handle that? And a comment was innocently made of, well, you got to be very careful about who advises you in that, especially if they're medical profession, because they're going to want to make you live as long as possible so they can cash that check or they can make money on that. And I just had to, because I've got a brother in the medical profession too. Whoa. There are doctors who are in it for the money, just like there are pastors who are in it for the money, just like there are police officers who are in it for the money or for the. So there are bad apples, but let's not conflate the doctor profession, the medical profession. Mike, I know you're close related to somebody in the medical profession, and there genuinely is, and every doctor I've ever talked to, every nurse I've ever talked to, any hospital worker is most intensely and purposely targeted towards the well-being of their patients. And to kind of have this idea that there's some cabal out there, some medical cabal that just wants to wring you dry of every last penny, that's not reality. And it erodes trust in a profession that is really designed and works hard to be trustworthy. A doctor doesn't, even if they work hard to cash the check today and do it at the cost of their ethics, they don't get to serve patients for the duration of their career. It submarines their career as soon as somebody finds out. They want to serve every patient that they will ever serve today and 50 years from now, or 25 years from now at the end of their career. And they're guarding that because the well-being of those patients ensures that.
I couldn't say it better.
Cool. All right. So we've been hearing for months that the vaccine is coming. Now it's here. Not everybody gets to take it yet, but they're working on that. There are some limitations. There's supply issues. There are just distribution issues. And then, of course, there's just figuring out who should be of highest priority when it comes to getting the vaccine. But what does this mean for the pandemic? Joey, tell us a little bit about, now that the vaccine is here, how is this going to affect things? What can we count on or what can we hope for?
Well, I really think it's hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel that we're seeing. If enough people get the vaccine, we could be looking at a whole different kind of social existence, by the end of this year. But again, we got all those barriers to overcome, for people to trust and kind of follow advice and kind of get it done. But the vaccine, I think, is really, really huge development. It's probably the development that's going to lead to us finally getting to the end of this.
Now, that's interesting. You said by the end of the year. We're right at the beginning of the year. I mean, it's January. So are you saying that we're not looking at things getting back to a normal social existence or a previous or a new social existence, however you said that? Are we talking about 12 months still?
Well, it's me being conservative, man. I mean, see, there's so many things that are kind of factoring into this that we just don't know. And when you take a deep dive into the CDC's publication on the vaccine, there's a lot of unknowns on it yet. The studies to get the emergency authorization only extended for 2 months. So we've proven that it's 95% effective out to 2 months. But the CDC even says right in their documentation, hey, we really just don't know if, how long this immune protection lasts from the vaccine. It's probably going to be really good. We have no reason to think it won't be necessarily, but we don't have the science really there yet. There just hasn't been the time. So that's kind of an unknown. The fact that we're starting to see some mutations in some other parts of the world is also a little bit of an unknown with that. So we've got the new strains kind of arising over in England, Ireland, Denmark, that one that's kind of going around over there. Brazil is tracking something a little weird. Read something about South Africa the other day. So far, these have been mutations that have changed the transmissibility of the virus, but haven't made it haven't made the vaccine ineffective against it. Does that make sense? The vaccine still works against those mutations, we think, it seems. So nothing has really evaded the vaccine as far as we can tell. But, you know, we're always kind of one day, one mutation away from something that might change the game, you know. And that kind of adds the speed, the critical speed factor to getting these vaccines done, getting enough people vaccinated that this virus runs out of hosts to mutate inside of, you know. So, but it's looking good, honestly. If we would have done this interview 2 months ago, I was telling people in the clinic, you know, I think hang tight, somewhere in June, you might have green light to get the vaccine, but it's looking like in Appleton here. We've already moved to phase 1B, or we're days away from it. That's going to be people over 65 and maybe 2-3-ish months away from just the general population. That's kind of a couple months ahead of what I was thinking. So there's questions, but there's also really good cause for optimism, I think.
Well, that's good to hear. So I think as I'm looking at just a couple of the questions that have come across now, I see Tim, you had a question just about the simplicity of it. And Tim, I think we're going to try and answer that a little bit later, but as long as you're on the subject, Joey, of the kind of the science of this, let's talk about it. The only vaccine that we have available to us right now is the one from Pfizer and from Moderna. Both of those are mRNA vaccines. You know, if I'm a dummy who has no idea, which is me when it comes to medical stuff, help me understand what this does. Talk to me about how this vaccine works, because I understand it's not the same as like your typical flu vaccine in a given year.
Yeah.
What does this do? How does it help?
Okay, I'm going to give all three of you permission to cut me off at any point during this, because I geek out about this science like majorly. All right. I'm so pumped about this.
You know, Mike is usually the first person to interrupt people, so you might just jump right in.
I'll give you the short.
Joey, go grab another beer.
Yeah, right. So typically our vaccines have been kind of two varieties. We either take a virus, so I'm talking about viral vaccines right here. We take a virus, we damage it with some heat or chemical treatment, but it's still kind of a full virus. It's just lost a lot of its kind of infection potential. And we just inject that into people like a full kind of disabled virus. It's called live attenuated virus. That was pretty good. But there was a chance people could get sick from that, you know, if you didn't perfectly disable everything, or if someone was immune compromised and kind of at risk. That's kind of a little risky way to do vaccines. The other type of vaccine is to like pluck little proteins out of the capsule around the virus and just kind of inject those proteins into people so their immune system can kind of see the, you know, the outside flag of the virus and kind of get used to that, and then hopefully recognize the full virus when it comes in. That worked pretty well too. You got to inject a lot of protein into people to get a adequate immune response. So, you know, that's why a lot of times we got to do vaccines 2 or 3 times in a series, you know, to get enough exposure there, but it works pretty well. This new way is like totally awesome. So forget about the virus, forget about the proteins. We're taking the genetic material from inside the virus, messenger mRNA. So what the little code to make protein. The researchers found the genetic code that codes for that famous spike protein on the outside of the virus. They took that code, they packaged it up with a bunch of lipids to kind of stabilize it because it's super, super fragile. And that's also, incidentally, why this virus has to be transmitted at an ungodly cold temperature, because it'll just like fall apart if it's, left at room temperature for too long. We inject the mRNA in the vaccine. It gets into the cells, and the cells use their own machinery to use that mRNA to make the protein that's in the virus and make millions of copies of it. So with just a little bit of mRNA, we get a huge response of viral protein being made inside of people. And then the immune system kind of gets to know that and is ready to kill the virus when it gets into people. It's pretty just amazing. I can already anticipate one of the questions, so maybe I'll just go there right away. Like, does this mRNA, does it affect our genetic code? Because we're inserting genes into people with this.
I was just going to ask that. Are we turning ourselves into lizards, or are we doing something like that? I've heard people say that this is, I saw a great conspiracy theory that said this was alien DNA being used. Yeah. This could turn us all into lizard people or something. So,
Well, it's a fair question. That's for sure. But the answer is absolutely not. And if you read or hear a video that tells you otherwise, I will just tell you that person probably has not gone to medical school and really doesn't understand the science behind it. mRNA, messenger mRNA, does not get back into the nucleus where the DNA is actually stored. Messenger mRNA is actually a slightly different molecule than DNA, so it can't just insert itself into your genetic code. Plus, the DNA in the nucleus of your cell isn't just sitting there in one little beautiful long highway strip that a little mRNA can come and just plug itself into. It's all tangled up and held together, held closed with proteins and supported. And if an mRNA gene inserted itself into there, it would change the whole conformation of this knot of DNA into a way that your cells probably couldn't even replicate it anymore to reproduce. So that cell would just self-destruct if that was even possible for the mRNA to get in there, which it's really not.
I think of it a little bit like the whole concept that, God designed his creation so that we replicate within kinds. And you can't just suddenly introduce something that is of a completely different kind and make, in the same way that they can't even get two kinds of dogs that are too far apart genetically to breed with each other, let alone inject a piece of DNA into a human being and have it completely change their whole cellular structure, right?
Right. Yeah. It's just, and it's not the way mRNA works. It's such a fragile molecule itself. Man, you're asking it to do 20 things that it's just impossible for it to do, for it to get that far. Yeah.
Yeah. Joey, we just had a question in the chat from Donna. This takes us a little bit in a different direction, but maybe you can answer it real quickly. What about using DNA from aborted fetuses? I know there's a lot of Christians who are concerned about kind of that component. I know I've read a couple of different things on this, but you've probably read the actual studies and have a lot more insight in that. So I'm going to defer to you and let you take this one.
This is a really great question. And I should preface, maybe I should have done this at the beginning, that, a lot of these questions or these scenarios are a result of a sinful world and a history of a lot of things being done in a sinful world that there just is not a perfect ethical solution for, right? So I'm going to try to give my opinion on this, but I want to say up front that I think that there is not a truly right answer. And if people disagree with me, I completely respect that. And I think they're just as right as I am. All right. So the question about aborted babies and vaccines goes back to the 1970s and 80s. when two particular fetuses that were babies that were electively aborted by their parents, not because they were asked by a research company, but chose to do these abortions, and the research company came in and took the aborted baby afterwards for research and developed a whole bunch of fetal cell lines off of these two particular aborted babies. There was one in the Netherlands that eventually the cells became one cell line stock that was used in the early testing phases for these two COVID vaccines. Now, you got to keep in mind that these are not anymore the original fetal cells. I mean, these are exponentially far away from those initial cells that are long dead and gone. These are cells that have gone through multiple divisions and different cell line divisions and so on, and they're cataloged by hundreds of different cell line numbers now. But yes, they do track back to those two fetuses. I respect that there's going to be differences here now. Does the initial event mean that the whole thing should be avoided? Like the whole product, all the products that follow after that should be avoided? I respect the opinion if you think they should. I read parts of the Pope's statement against, I shouldn't say against, but just about the COVID vaccine. And he says, if we can avoid using these products, we should. But if there is no other alternative product that doesn't use those, and if the potential for saving lives is huge, then okay, go ahead and do it, But I respect people who are not comfortable with that. The other viewpoint is, hey, there was a lot of evil involved in the 70s on a couple fronts when these cell lines were gathered. But we're decades away from that now. And we can't deny that millions, if not billions of people, lives have been saved because of the use of these cells for development of medications and so on. And we can ask if we're far enough away from that evil, that we can say, hey, there's some good to be done here with what we have now. One other thing, if I could add on this, the ethical argument that's involved against this, when it comes to ethical arguments, I always think we got to apply this fairly to all situations, right? If we're going to argue against fetal cells in vaccines and medications, if we're going to argue that an evil event upstream negates using the good products afterwards, you got to understand that there's very little that you should accept for treatment inside of medicine. I hate to say it, but for example, some famous examples, the Nazis in the concentration camps gave us a lot of what we know about treatment of hypothermia, dehydration, hypoxia, the deficit of oxygen and what that does to damage our tissues, and then how we can treat that. Some drugs came out of Nazi experiments where people were tortured and died against their will. There are photographs of this happening in the concentration camps where people are being frozen to death, and you got two Nazi doctors standing over them. So when you go in the hospital and you get fluids for dehydration and oxygen for after a heart attack, people were murdered in the gathering of the science behind those treatments. And if we're going to apply these ethical arguments evenly there's a lot we need to object to in terms of treatment inside of medicine.
And I think so. I think maybe it's good to go back to the COVID stuff, because we could go off on a tangent on what you just talked about, other vaccines that are a result of, or medical procedures that are a result of the abortion. Maybe that's Brandon, if you're looking for other shows, maybe that's a different show. But I think, Joy, if I can kind of get you to weigh in, like one of the concern, or not concerns, but one of the things people weigh in their mind is the potential risk of getting the COVID vaccine against the potential risk of getting COVID itself. Could you just kind of help, like, what are some things we should be putting in that balance to make a decision with something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say, in terms of the vaccine, I'm trying to remember the exact number from the studies. So for the Pfizer vaccine, there were about 40,000 people studied in the trials. And of those, just shy of 20,000 were given the vaccine and monitored for adverse reactions. It was a little less for the Moderna vaccine. I think it was something like 15,000 people got it, or 14,000. And it was an incredibly low number that had serious reactions to it. I think the percentage came to about right around 1 to 1.5% in the vaccinated group, but in the placebo group, about 0.5 to 1% had adverse reactions just from getting saline injected into them. So the difference seemed to be less than a percentage, or less than even half of a percentage point of serious adverse reactions to the vaccine. That seems to be much lower than the risk of serious adverse events from COVID, which I could tell you even from my own experience in the clinic, where people are on oxygen months later. It's been crazy, the lingering symptoms that we've seen after some of this. So it seems like the vaccine is lower risk than COVID. But again, we've got 2 months worth of data, and we got to admit where the facts and the knowledge kind of end.
All right, so Joey, I'm gonna kind of following on what Ben asked there, which was kind of just focusing on this vaccine and the decision-making process. I'm going to ask you for a minute, you are a doctor, but you're also a dad, you're a husband, you have a family that you have to think about, and you're also a Jesus follower. Okay, so you don't approach the world the way that a lot of people do, right? There's probably a lot of people out there who are approaching the world, they're approaching this whole virus with fear. This life is all they have, right? And if I don't preserve this life, then what's going to happen to me? But that's not the perspective that you have on the world. So from that perspective, as a Jesus follower and a dad and a husband and a doctor, you're talking to your family, you're talking to your patients, you're talking to yourself. What questions do you ask yourself about this subject? You're walking through, should I get this vaccine? Should I deal with this? How do I approach this whole situation? Just open that up. Yeah.
About a year ago, I read Eric Metaxas, his biography on Martin Luther, the man behind me here. And this was before the pandemic. And that guy lived through some pretty bad plague over in Europe. And he wrote a fair amount about how a Christian person can view that kind of thing, kind of similar to what we're going through now. And I think some of this kind of made the rounds on social media too, but one thing I was kind of impressed with was his, well, first of all, he housed people, plague victims in the cloister there, and put himself at risk for the good of his fellow man. I just felt like that was the Jesus thing to do, the caring thing to do. And he wrote things that were similar to that. So My vibe on it has been, and part of his writing too was, he mentioned something about, if there's a treatment to make this better or some good advice to make this better, Christians should consider following that out of love and concern for their fellow man. That's kind of guided me a lot through this, So when it comes to the concept of the vaccine or, government officials, oh, am I frozen? Can you hear me still?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Your video did freeze on us, so
here
just
we
keep
go.
talking, and
It'll come back.
it'll look like claymation for a while. That's okay.
Yeah. But when it comes to, how I consider the vaccine or wearing a mask or staying away from people, if the government is telling me, hey, these things might help even just a little bit, my vibe has been, hey, out of love for my fellow people, I'm going to do it even if it helps a little bit. I know there's probably going to be an explosion of comments about that. But I'm not judging anybody else's take on this when I say that, okay? I'm just saying that's been my vibe as a Christian. I feel like the love that Jesus showed for people and the sacrifice he was willing to go through for people, the selflessness that he showed while he was here, kind of guides me to be selfless myself.
Definitely appreciate that, and I'm gonna pitch this over to Mike for a second. Mike, you've had your Bible open across the table from me here for a bit, and I'm thinking that this question also kind of, because we've always talked about the fact that you're around the table here, you got to be the best of the three of us at loving people. And Ben and I try, but man, we just don't.
Sometimes
We're not at your level yet. So
sometimes we try. Not sometimes he's better. He's almost always better.
Okay, man, you guys.
So based on what Joey just said, that for him, this is a lot about loving people. Why don't you give your perspective on that just for a second? I just want to hear what you have to say about that.
Sure. Boy, that's a big question and a lot of different ways that it could cover. And I was saving this for another part, but maybe it fits here, and I was going to go back to Tim's question where he asked what would Jesus do, and Tim, I'm going to maybe disappoint you here. I'm not going to say Jesus would take the vaccine or he wouldn't, or he would wear a mask or he wouldn't wear a mask, but rather what would Jesus do in terms of loving other people. And I was actually going back to Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 12. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift from God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing taken from it. God does it so that the people will fear him. And the footnote here is for verse 14, what is the purpose of life? Is it that we should revere the all-powerful God? That's what it is. To fear God means to respect and stand in awe of him because of who he is. Purpose in life starts with whom we know, not what we know or how good we are. It is impossible to fulfill your God-given purpose unless you revere God and give him first place in your life. So to answer your question, if I am revering God rather than deciding exactly what I need to do here, I need to revere God. And as I'm revering God and trusting God as a result of that, rather than trying to determine what is right and what is wrong here, I'm loving other people. And so in the midst of disagreeing, I'm kind of fed up with the church disagreeing with each other and not loving each other. We can disagree with each other. That's certainly fine. The church can disagree. I'm not saying that's not allowed, because if the church is in complete agreement with what's going on in society, there may be problems. But if the church is not loving the people in the church, and that's where I've seen this becoming a problem. And so I want to bring that back where we, the church, are not only loving the people in our church that we disagree with, whether they're wearing a mask or not, or taking the vaccine or not taking the vaccine, but we're also doing that with people in our society. Not saying, well, I go to church, I'm a Lutheran, I wear a mask, I'm getting the vaccine, and therefore I'm better than you.
Mike, I'm glad you brought it back there. And I was reading an article today that was talking about, kind of from the Christian perspective, everything in vaccine, masks. And one of their points was that the unity of the body of Christ is not contingent on political affiliation. It's not contingent on where you stand on masks. It is built only upon the blood of Christ, the sacrificial lamb who took away the sins of the world. And to let anything else divide the church, as in, like I think you said it well, it's good to disagree with each other. It's okay that there are people in the same church building on a weekend or tuning in online at the same time who would vote differently if the presidential election happened again today. That's okay. But to have animosity towards, to have bitterness towards, to have anger towards somebody, to think less of somebody because they disagree with you on some of these topics, is to set aside the blood of Christ and instead idolize whatever this is. Maybe it's not wearing masks, or it is wearing masks, or it is getting the vaccine or not. There's all kinds of things that we could draw dividing lines. And when the church of God, his body, his people here on earth, we have been given the message of reconciliation to be his ambassadors to this world. And when instead we become ambassadors of something with COVID, then it's not God who wins in that. It's not right. It's not truth that wins in that. It's Satan. That's truth being used as a bludgeon to beat somebody. It's facts being used against people to divide people. And you guys have both heard me say this, and maybe many tuning in tonight have too, but Satan has long tried to sink the church, to crumble its foundations. Jesus promised it that he never would win, that the gates of Hades would never march against it. But he has tried everything from stoning to death by lion, burning at the stake, which is an awful way to die. He has tried everything. He's tried schisms and divisions about doctrine and orthodoxy. He has tried everything. And maybe it's just because we're in the middle of it, but it feels like he's winning more with a 6-inch piece of cloth than he ever did with facing a coliseum full of lions.
Yeah.
And in a church, let's come together in this moment. Let's disagree and love each other and show the world that is so divided. It almost feels like irreparably divided. Let's show them what charity and compassion and grace look like. Let's demonstrate that for the world. And by doing so, I mean, it's one of the marks of the early church. Who was it, Brandon? Maybe you remember, but wrote that the Christians love each other in a way. They even love the widows of the pagans and love the community around them in such a way that and this was going back before even 1500s. There's plagues in Rome in the 1st and 2nd century. And Christians would go into the dirty, the messy. They'd be the ones that stayed back and helped those who were dying of bubonic plague and terrible diseases at the risk to their own life. And it was a witness to non-Christians who said, why on earth would they risk their lives? They could evacuate. They could be safe. And this is what it means to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We need to do it to an unbelieving world. We need to do it to each other. Other Christians are not excluded from showing that Christian love and that charity and understanding and other-centered.
That's Pliny the Younger, by the way. Who
I knew you would have it. I knew you would have it, Brandon.
Yeah, that was his fascination with the Christians, that they were so willing to put themselves on the line for others, for people that they had no reason to love, and yet they chose to love them. And this is good. And I'm glad that we're focusing on this question of how do we love the people around us well. And whether you believe that loving somebody well means get the vaccine and therefore you won't be a risk of infection, or whether you believe that loving other people well is carried out in some other way, that's the root of it. Now, along with that, though, I think we have to maybe ask this question from just a theological question for a second. What place does medical science have in the life of a Christian? That is, when it comes to my faith, believing that God will take care of me. This is one of the things I've seen a lot of. And I'm going to throw this out. Joey, you can answer this. Ben, Mike, any of you guys. I've seen a lot of people react to this, talking about this as a matter of, well, if you have faith and trust that God is going to take care of you, or you believe it's your time, or what, any of those kind of things, then why should I fear? And if I don't have any fear, then why do I need to take these precautions? Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about the place of medical intervention in general in our lives from a theological standpoint?
Well, I'll start, and I really appreciate what you just said, Ben. I answered the question the way I did 5 minutes ago because I think I was asked for, my opinion on how I live.
Yeah.
And that was, I'm not coming at you. This is just what I've been hearing.
I totally got it. Yeah. This is more, I guess, for the listeners, though, just so they don't feel like I am prescribing for them the way that they have to approach this just by giving, the way that my heart works about this. That's just how I tick. And to what Ben said, I think that is very important that we got to remember when we approach this differently that we got to love each other. Forward to the question that Brandon just asked, kind of how does where does medicine fall in a faith-based worldview? I think for one, and this is kind of in the bracket of this COVID discussion, maybe where how medicine falls. I think for one, I just ask, why are we even here? Like, what are we protecting with this medication or these medical interventions? I think we're here to, those of us that have faith are trying to get other people closer to Christ as well, right? It's kind of Great Commission, living in God's grace and getting other people closer to God's grace. Well, how do our actions interface? How does our interface with medicine get other people closer to God? People who are living outside of the confidence that we have. People who are living with a lot of fear about this. I hesitate to even go here because, again, I don't want to light up listeners, right? But I'm just going to pose a question. If the unchristian, unchurched world that's terrified about this sees the Christians, throwing caution to the wind and reading that as putting them at risk, how does that advance the gospel? When the peasants revolted back in Martin Luther's time, and they put up crosses and recited Bible verses and connected this revolt with Christianity, Luther was really angry about that because he felt that this wasn't going to advance the gospel well at all, the way Christians were behaving. Now, again, I'm not judging anybody's specific actions here, but I'm just saying that this kind of concept can maybe inform how Christians interact with medicine and the decisions we make. I'm gonna turn it over to the rest of you guys and maybe comment off of what you have to say.
Ben, Mike, either one of you guys want to jump in and take this?
I think it's a more complex question, and I really do appreciate Joey's insight. And it's if our and Mike talked about this. Joey was talking about it too. Our ultimate objective is to bring God honor and glory and praise. We do that. One of the primary ways we do that is by being a witness to the world, sharing our faith, being evangelists, being those ambassadors. We do that through word and action. Those are our primary objectives. The challenge becomes how do you do that? And I think as Christians, it's critical for us to have this broader view that both helps answer the question and doesn't answer it at the same time. We have to see this in the flow of creation, fall, restoration, resurrection, and then restoration. Kind of that arc of Scripture. And we have to be able to say that any disease, whether it's COVID or Alzheimer's or leukemia, all of it is a result of the fall. We wouldn't have it if Adam and Eve hadn't partaken of that fruit, hadn't broken away from the will of God. If they had not stepped into that world of being their own gods in their own minds, we wouldn't have any of this. And man, wouldn't that be nice? We wouldn't be having this discussion. Probably wouldn't have Pub Theology because we'd all be followers of God. We'd walk and talk with him whenever we wanted to. But every one of these kind of touch points is a reminder that sin lives in this world, not just specifically in me, but generically in the world, that creation groans under sin. And it longs for a rescuer. This COVID fits into the narrative of the rescue of God for humanity. Creation itself longs for a day when it will be free from from earthquakes and fires and floods and droughts. So too does humanity. In a very general sense, all of humanity longs for the day when we'll be rescued. That rescue is specifically and only pointed out through the gospel, that Jesus came to be among us. Talk about someone who engaged with the sick and the dying and the broken at risk to himself. He caught the plague of death, right, so to speak. And he enters into humanity that he might rescue those who were lost. And only when we have that kind of narrative does this COVID and medical intervention, that's got to be in the background of our perspective on, do I seek medical advice? Do I seek medical intervention? What about this procedure or that, this medicine? If I'm not working from that, I'm working from an incomplete picture. And I might go in the right direction, but it's more or less accidentally. I've got to have that background as I step into these difficult decisions, because God does not command a do not resuscitate order, nor does he forbid it. So what is my attitude when I come at that? God doesn't command that I get this procedure or this medicine, nor does he forbid it. So what is my attitude when I come to that discussion? It cannot be, and this is where the COVID thing gets real messy, because this COVID, the COVID conversation is, whether we like it or not, has been infiltrated by a bigger political discussion. And it's not, and no longer is it about, whether or not I've got 3 knee surgeries, 3 ACL reconstructions. I'm on track to get knee replacements. Whether or not I get knee replacements, nobody cares. Like, that's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat. Nobody cares, right? Nobody cares more than me. But this COVID thing is, strangely enough, it is. It's a political issue. So I think we need to, each Christian really has some hard work to do to disentangle what is it about my Christian worldview that informs this, and what other worldviews might also be informing this. And your medical thing is, again, broaden that out. All of my decisions, I have to disentangle, because every one of those decisions is informed by the new creation. It is also informed by an old Adam. They're at war with each other constantly. And it is hard work. And sometimes work that I can't do by myself. I have to be humble enough. Brandon, you and I are in the same small group where once a month, punch guys get together. I got to submit myself to you guys and say, here's what I'm thinking. Help me navigate. What's coming from God, Christ here? What's coming from myself? Because if it's of myself, put that to death. I don't want anything to do with it. It's not me. Who I am is this new creation. And that goes for COVID. It goes for any medical. Like, I've got to do that hard work. And it's not the same for everybody, because everybody's got they fall somewhere different on that spectrum. But it is incumbent on the Christ follower to do that hard work, to reflect and analyze and ask other people to speak into it. Let's open this passage, Ecclesiastes, go to Proverbs. go to see some of Jesus' miracles, would I have gone over and touched the leper knowing that it would have gotten me sick? I don't know. I don't know if I would have. Would I have been motivated by fear of that sickness, motivated by fear of what other people would have thought of me, motivated any number of things? I've got to do that hard work.
Ben, what you're saying has got me thinking, and I've been asking a lot of questions, but I kind of want to just share my opinion on this for a minute. And you're expressing it well, that ultimately this has become a political issue, but it really is. It should not be a political issue at all. We're dealing with the fact that there is a disease that has gotten people sick and it has claimed lives. And so now the question for us as Christians is, what are the priorities God gives us that we respond to? I can think of two main things. One we've talked about a lot, which is love for our neighbor. And the question that I have to ask myself is, how do I love my neighbor around me best? And I'm going to share my opinion for a moment. I just want to be careful to say that even though, I serve at St. Mark, my opinion is just my opinion. But in my opinion, I'm going to trust what the medical personnel say, that says the best way to keep other people safe is to do these things. And can I love people by doing those, even if it means, for myself for a moment, saying whether or not I think that I'm afraid of getting the virus, or whether or not I'm afraid of it, how it affects me. I got other people that I got to think about. So that's one side. But another perspective from Scripture, what God says is 1 Corinthians 6, 19 to 20, don't you know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You're not your own. You are bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. I mean, does it go? You guys, Ben, Mike, Joey, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to just say that I think that part of honoring God with my body is taking good care of it, right? And so when it comes to the bigger question of how do I interact with medical technology at all, we don't take the Christian Scientist view that says, oh, we don't need any of it. We just need to pray and trust, and it'll just get better. And we don't take the faith healer perspective that says, if you just have faith enough, God will heal you of any disease. We take the recognition that God has given us tools to use to take care of our bodies. In the same way that he's given us food to feed our bodies, we don't just say, Lord, today, help me to not be hungry. I mean, I do, because then I don't eat as much, and then that helps my waistline. But that's another issue. But in the end, we use the things that God gives us to take care of ourselves.
I guess we're going to put an addition on our church, but we're just going to use our hands and not use the diggers and the cement trucks and everything that's out there.
No power tools.
No power tools. Yeah. So
that would really disappoint Mike, because he likes his power tools.
I think for me, it's one of those things where it's good for us. It's good for us to be informed, to know, to do our research, to be aware. And you're right, Brandon. We can certainly there's that line of I'm just going to be oblivious to everything and trust God, or I'm going to do too much research and be so consumed. And so I guess if you're so consumed in trying to make a decision here and come up with facts that you have consumed so much of that in your relationship with Jesus isn't there, then there's a problem. And so I just wanted a quick touch on Hebrews 10:23. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess. For he who promised is faithful. God is faithful. And so let's consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting with one another. And the note there again goes to we may grow in faith, overcome doubts and questions, and to overcome our doubts and our questions by encouraging each other, by digging into God's word, and to continue worshiping with each other in many different ways.
Yeah, for sure. So if we were to ask some questions of ourselves, if we were to say, all right, maybe I should just make as an aside, and I hope that this doesn't come across to say that if somebody says, you know what though, I mean, I'm going to do what I can to love my neighbor by not putting myself in a position where I'm going to infect somebody else. But I'm just gonna trust that God's either going to take care of me or He's going to take care of me or take me. That's you know, and I mean, to a certain extent, could we say theologically, hey, if I'm just trusting that God's going to take me when He wants to take me, I'm not going to worry too much about myself. I'm not going to fault that kind of hope and that kind of faith, because we're hoping for something greater. But when it comes right down to what are the questions I should ask myself, if I'm standing in that place of, okay, now I have a choice to make. I have to decide if I'm going to take this or not. I should walk myself through a process, right? I should kind of have how do I make sure I'm not being motivated by the wrong things? So give me some questions to ask myself to make sure I'm not motivated the wrong way. Joey, Ben, Mike, whoever.
I think the easiest one to state is, does God command it or does God call it sin? You got to start there, and then it leads to other questions, right? If God calls this a sin, should I, should I have 7 beers tonight? No, God calls that a sin. That's easy, right? That question is simple. That leads to other questions in the COVID scenario, because does God call a vaccine sin or does He not? There's no passage you can point to in Scripture. At best, you can say it's an application. The closest you can say this is an application. But there's no law in God's Word that says take a vaccine or don't take a vaccine.
I just wondered too if, a question we can ask ourselves is, I might be in a really good place with this. I feel like my decision glorifies God, gives praise to God, but yet is my decision and my example going to pose some difficulty for people who aren't quite where I am? Again, I really kind of consider the people who are in so much fear out in society. And is what I am doing here, is it increasing or decreasing the likelihood that they will ever set foot in the church where the gospel is preached? Or is my decision going to make it difficult for them to kind of interface with Christianity? My example. That's kind of a question I ask myself. How is this going to affect the appeal of the gospel?
I think that's an important question to be asking ourselves. What witnesses, what testifies best to the truth, so that others see through my life Christ more clearly? And while the idea of whether or not I get a shot may not seem at first blush to have anything to do with that, the reality is the way that I approach this and the way that I talk about it, the way that I post about it on social media, all of that stuff is going to affect the way people see Jesus. I want to make sure that they're seeing Him as clearly as possible through the things that I say and do, whichever direction I go with it, right? I mean, if I'm the person who says, I just don't believe this is a good thing to get, and I'm not feeling comfortable taking this vaccine, I won't do it. At the very least, then make sure that I want to talk about that when I talk about it in a way that points to Jesus. And I want to share about it, the reasons for it, in a way that says, this is who I'm serving, this is who I'm trying to glorify, this is my goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like there's been so many people in our church family who I went to see in the hospital in different sicknesses, cancer, and in that, the way they shared their faith with the people around them. And I know there's people sharing their faith, those who have COVID. I know that we even have someone in our church family who lost a loved one, and what they pointed out was they know that person and their family is in heaven because a neighbor invited them to church. And so just sum all that up by saying, my heart goes to people who have lost loved ones through this, and whether you are choosing to take a vaccine or not take a vaccine, it comes down to, again, how am I loving people around me? How am I sharing Jesus with people around me? and doing that more so than making it a more of a stumbling block and a problem, whether I should or I shouldn't.
Another question that comes to mind that's important is, am I setting aside my own pride in the matter? Because I might hear the advice of 100 people and not like what I hear, and then say, therefore, I'm not going to take this advice. But is the reason I'm not taking that because I'm definitely right, or is it because I've got some pride in the matter? And maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I need to ask myself that question. Is the reason I'm rejecting the advice that I'm hearing because of my pride, or is it because I'm really definitely clinging to the truth here? And that's a good question for self-reflection with anything in my life, is where, how is my pride, how is my own ego rising up here? Because pride, I think, is, in a lot of ways, it's the original sin, right? It's putting myself at the top of the list above God and saying, anything God puts in my life, anybody that God puts in my life, any word of wisdom God sends to me, I compare it all to what's already up here and decide, and then judge it, rather than saying, I might just not be the right one to make this decision. I got to trust the people God puts in my life.
I'm reading through a book right now. I'm only part of the way through, so I'm only going to remember it's five questions to ask, better decisions and no regrets. I'm only like halfway through, so I'll only be able to remember 3 of them. It's not a very long book, but it's from a Christian perspective. So after the question of, is this sin or is it glorifying God? After the question of, how does this impact my Christian witness? I think both of those are number 1, number 2. But after that, things like, why am I doing this? Really? Like, I got to look deep into the motive. So we've talked about that tonight. What is the wise thing here? Because wisdom plays into this too. And I think formulating that question well and answering it as objectively as possible helps. Questions, what am I going to, what legacy am I going to leave with this decision? Because we're all going to talk about 2020 to our grandkids. This is going to be a story that we tell. And as much as possible, can I put myself in that storytelling mode, in the rocker with my grandkids? And what am I going to tell them about this decision? Again, I don't know that it leads one direction or the other, but it helps it zoom out and give that broader perspective. And I think asking some questions like that can help kind of eliminate some of the immediacy and the urgency and some of the things that happen right here. And maybe that helps some people kind of come to clarify some of their answers.
As of next Friday, we'll have 2 teenagers in the house, so I don't want to think about grandkids yet.
Well, we've talked through the theology of this, and if you've been tuning in, if you've been asking a lot of questions, I know there are a ton of questions that people have about this that maybe we can't answer every single one of them. Before we wrap up, and Dr. Schumann, are you okay if have you got a little bit more time with us, or do we need to let you go here?
Oh no, man, I could do this tonight.
All right.
Part 2 if you want.
I do want to ask a few practical questions now.
Yeah.
Okay, if I'm walking through the theological reflection, I'm asking myself those questions. What's going to love my neighbor best? What's going to take care of the body God has given me best? What's going to give the best witness to the truth and to Jesus and lead people closest to Him? How am I making sure my pride is not at the center of this thing? And how am I just focused on God's perspective, God's desire for His world? And as Ben said, what's leaving a legacy? Now, practicality. All right. I'm going to ask on 2 different directions, Joey, and I'm going to start with the direction of this. If I'm the person who says, you know what, after listening to this, after hearing your explanations and thinking this through theologically, I still think that I just don't think I should get this vaccine. I'm not sure that I should. What is a practical step I should take then to make sure I'm loving my neighbor and all of that stuff in this situation? Give me some best practices on that front.
Well, for one, I think I would respect your decision if you don't get the vaccine, and I should probably make that point over and over tonight. I'm giving my opinions on things, but if you disagree with me on it, I love you, and we're cool, we don't have to spar at each other about that. But I think what are some practical things you could do? I think you take every step just thinking, what's going to put my how can I still navigate life that gives glory to God? Well, I guess this is kind of what you said. We're staying away from that and kind of going practical. I think it looks like just, hey, following a couple easy safety guidelines that people who spend their whole life kind of studying this are suggesting that we do. And, if you hold our feet to the fire, doctors, if you hold our feet to the fire about, are masks perfect? Are they great protection? Is staying 6 feet away from people perfect protection? We're going to tell you it's not, but we're just trying every little thing that might help, and, maybe if you don't want the vaccine, considering some of those safety measures, even though they're not perfect, might be the way to kind of put your neighbors at ease and maybe keep yourself safe and your loved ones safe. The CDC actually in their statement about the vaccine writes it out that again, because the studies have only lasted 2 months on the vaccine, we're not really sure if this is the perfect protection out beyond that. So they even write down there that even if you get the vaccine, please still keep doing the measures that your government is suggesting, that your local safety health people are suggesting that you do. Please keep doing that. So I think that's maybe some practical things that you could do. Is that kind of the vibe of your question?
Yeah, I think so. Just how can I mean, there are people, I think, like you've said, there are people who maybe with good reason, good conscience are saying, I'm just not sure I want to do this. Mm-hmm. But there are still steps I can take to reduce the risk that I can give to somebody else, that at the very least can show consideration. I'm thinking about one guy that I talked to early on in this whole thing who said, I don't believe that this is even a real deal, he said, but you know what? I don't want to be a jerk, so I'll put on a mask. And I thought, well, I mean, and maybe somebody else would make a different decision. Okay. But I thought I could appreciate that way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Another practical thing I could say, this gets kind of the bigger metaphysical question, I think, behind this. What can I do? I was gifted a book by a pastor friend of mine, that I have no vested interest in the recommendation here, but Kelly Hewitt down around Madison, I was playing at his church once, and he handed me 2 books. They're called Following Jesus. You guys familiar with those?
Who's that by? It sounds familiar, but I can't say for sure.
I don't even recall. Maybe I can pop a link over later, but it was really practical, super practical ways just to kind of live and interface with people, that you can just kind of communicate God's love to people. So even if your decision is not to get vaccinated, just kind of putting some thought into how can I still just make it abundantly clear that I'm at peace. I love the world, with a Jesus love, and I want people to get there just like I am. Maybe investing some time and thought into that would be a good strategy too.
Okay, so let's go the other direction, Joey. I decided to get the vaccine.
Okay.
How do I make sure that? Well, I'll say this: what are some practical things? Now, first of all, there have been some good questions about the practical consideration of who should or shouldn't. Are there people who shouldn't get the vaccine? For instance, some have asked in the questions whether or not this affects fertility. There have been some people have questioned that if I want to have kids later on, I'm a woman, I want to have kids later on, should I get this? Will this affect that?
Yeah. That wasn't a yes to that question. Actually, the CDC on their website kind of outlines, again, what we know about this, which isn't a whole lot. Speaking of pregnancy specifically, it's hard to do studies ethically in pregnant women to subject them to treatments that might damage their baby. That's been the big medical ethical problem with obstetrics research, and that's why they rely on expert opinion in that field so much, right? Which incidentally is the lowest quality of medical evidence, expert opinion, right? So we just don't know, right? It seems like pregnant women who get COVID, the full-on deal, there's some risk involved, but still, with good medical care, healthy babies are generally delivered. That's manageable. So we extrapolate that then to the vaccine. Well, if we're just giving people one protein from that virus that they usually do well with, we would assume that they're still going to be fine. And the CDC says, it's probably fine for pregnant women to get the vaccine, or women who are trying to get pregnant to get the vaccine, but they just say talk to your doctor and kind of come to a mutual decision. So even the CDC kind of allows for pregnant women to object to the vaccine and decide not to get it.
Sure.
You shouldn't be strong-arm people to get it that way.
What about elderly people? There have been some questions about, there's potential for increased risk of heart conditions and other dangers. Is there a danger to if I'm caring about my body, as we said before, 1 Corinthians, should I take this? Should I be wary of it?
Well, you should be wary of any medical treatment, right? Any doctor should kind of tell you that there are risks to everything we do. I will say that, for the Pfizer vaccine, there were over 18,000 people given the vaccine up to the elder and through the elderly age group.
Okay, so they did use an elderly age group as part of their test subjects?
Absolutely, yeah. And well, now that I want to be completely accurate about that. I don't remember the exact age that they cut off, but it was up there, right? I think it's enough that we can say with some confidence that older people that have medical conditions really shouldn't expect anything serious to happen, because there really weren't problems when we compared it to people who got the saline, the saltwater vaccine, really in any age group. And that really included in the phase 2 and phase 3 trials, that included people with a ton of background medical conditions, including autoimmune problems, people who are autoimmune problems. I don't think they excluded immune compromised people. They really excluded people who had anaphylactic allergies or allergy problems with vaccines in the past. But otherwise, they kept those studies pretty well open to people from any medical background. It didn't seem to have a problem.
Okay. What if, let's say I get the vaccine and I decide to do and I think you've done it. I saw your post on Facebook when you got the vaccine. I know other people have done that, where they say, hey, I'm getting my shot. By the way, you got your second shot recently. Is that right? You
Sunday, man.
Yeah.
Sunday.
Okay. So, and you haven't grown a tail yet? No, just joking.
Yeah.
But sorry, don't mean to rehash that part of things. But okay. So let's say though I post about this and somebody says, "Hey, I feel like you're putting this in my face, and I feel maybe judged that the people who get the vaccine are." How do I, as a Christian, make sure that saying, "Hey, I got this and I think it was a good idea," doesn't come across as telling the people who didn't they're the bad people?
That's such a great question, man. And I will say that's been on my mind with so many things on social media lately. And I've held back from posting things on social media for that kind of reason. I posted that picture about myself getting the vaccine because I was excited about it, But yeah, if that came across as being judgmental of people who don't get it, then I regret that, because that's not what I meant. It was actually a psychology lecture I was listening to once in pediatric psychology that talked about our social media posts as kind of the highlights of our life, and what kind of stress that puts on other people that kind of aren't in the same place, And that thought has kind of made me hold back from posting kind of the all-star highlights of my life. Like, my wife and I went skiing last week, and we took some amazing pictures up in the UP, but I didn't post them because, some people are working all weekend long and just not getting away, and they're sad that that's their life. And
Right.
So I think that kind of gets to your question, like, what we're putting out there, just kind of always kind of doing it in a way that isn't judgy somehow,
Yeah, I think that's been a particular challenge. I think that social media, because this all intertwines, right? This is all our culture and the background that we're working under. We all have this social media. I saw a pastor that I deeply respect, Tim Keller, posted his note that he got a vaccine, and the comments about how he was virtue signaling and all this stuff. And I'm not here to comment on, my point is not to comment on him. It's just social media kind of encourages and genders this conversation. Maybe I don't know if you would call it a conversation, but let's be charitable and call it a conversation. And it just got to the point for me. I've taken the social media off. I have Pinterest on my phone because I love woodworking and recipes, cooking. But I've gotten rid of everything else. I don't have Insta. I don't have Facebook. If I want Facebook, I've got to open my browser. I close it at every opportunity during the day. I check it a couple of times because I'm in an admin for a couple of groups that I want to, make sure that I'm following up with people. But I will tell you personally that my life is better without it. And again, this is how people connect. So people can make their own decisions. That leads down into a different conversation about the role of social media. And
we are watching this on Facebook, by the way.
We are watching this on Facebook. Am I pushing away our audience by saying you should get rid of Facebook on your phone? But, it's just, it is hard. Joe, I hear you struggling to put it into words. How do you say something that you're for without coming across as against the opposite?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if there's a way to do that. I don't know if, as much as we'd like to be able to navigate that, it is nigh on impossible. And maybe it is another good reminder. Just back away from the social media. It's okay to take breaks. Lent is coming up, and I know a lot of people who will take a fast from social media during Lent and just walk away from it, because you almost, especially if you have more than 2 followers, one of them being your mom, it's hard not to come across that way. Yeah. And it's so hard.
Do you have cupcakes on your Pinterest page?
I probably do. Yeah.
The whole thing, I could post something that's really, I just bought this new car. And the way I post it could say, boy, my family and I we've had the same car for years, and we've saved up, and we're really blessed to have this new car. Or I could post it and say, look what I got, and boast about it. And so, I think you're right, Ben. There's just so many different ways to carry how we form our words and our opinions online to people on social media. And I just caution people to just be aware of that.
Can I just ask? Courtney put this comment in the chat and wanted to get your answer to this, Joey. She says there's a lot of people who are waiting to get the vaccine until their side effects are more studied. There's more results, better understanding. As a doctor, so here's her question: as a doctor, do you feel people wanting to wait until that? Does that make a difference? I guess is kind of her question. Will it ultimately make much of a difference if people wait? I don't know what kind of timeline Courtney is identifying here, but a year, let's say. Will that benefit them to know what? Will there be side effects that could come out? Is this a possibility? Does it just kind of talk through that? Maybe they're saying, "I'll take it, just not yet." I'm open to the idea, but this is too early for me.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if you would have asked me how I feel about the vaccine 2 or 3 months ago, before I really read deep in the data, I would have had the same concern that maybe Courtney has, that, wow, we just don't have a lot of time to tell us truly how safe this is. And I don't know if this is going to make you feel better or worse, Courtney, but to give the emergency authorization of the vaccine, the CDC wanted it studied in over 3,000 people, and for at least 1 to 2 months. They kind of labeled it differently in different areas from what I read, and that was done. And the reason they picked 1 to 2 months, this gets back to your question, is because we know from vaccine science, from other vaccines, that when people have true damage from the vaccine, usually we start to see signs from that within about 6 weeks. Okay, statistically, we generally see those signs in 6 weeks, and that's from tracking other vaccines for years, right? And that's what made the CDC comfortable saying, hey, we can consider this already at 2 months, because that should be far enough out beyond the 6-week mark that we can kind of make some extrapolations, some conclusions. Yeah. But then again, I totally respect someone who says, hey, I'm still not super comfortable with this. Medicine does need to respect that people have some autonomy about what gets put in their bodies, right? And so I would respect your reservations, but I would say that the CDC, there's some science behind 2 months being pretty good indication of what we're going to get from adverse reactions on the vaccines.
Well, thank you for that answer too, Joey. That does help a lot. And being that we're at about an hour and 35, which is about 35 minutes past our normal time on Pub Theology, I'm going to call it there and say, let's just do one quick around the table here. Final thoughts. I'm going to go Ben, Mike, and then let Joey have the last word. Well, no, I'll go Ben, Mike, myself, and then let Joey have the last word. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I think.
Is there a question here that we're answering, or we're just saying?
Just get final thoughts.
Okay.
Final thoughts, Mike.
I think, so my final thought is just in this discussion, for any offense that I spoke, any sin that I carried in this conversation, I repent of that. I recognize that I'm a sinful human being that maybe has not thought through this well enough, clear enough, thoroughly enough, that I've spoken maybe out of turn or inappropriately. And if I've done so, I repent of that. And, I'm humbled by the fact that I'm even in this conversation, and recognize the weight of all the considerations that go into this for a lot of people. And I pray that, I'm in my sin, I'm comforted by the grace of Jesus. We've talked about that maybe some tonight, and we can always talk about it more. But that the Lord of the universe would give his life for me, even as I maybe speak inappropriately. And I just, I know Facebook's not necessarily the place to individually confront sin and give forgiveness. But know that I'm still working this out and trying to figure out how to put this right, how to say it correctly, how to speak with truth and grace. And if I've misstepped, I repent of that.
Thank you for that, Ben. And the grace God has given us, all of us, you, me, and anyone here, is pretty unfathomable. We can't understand that, but I'm thankful for it as well. And you actually reminded me of my Good Friday service last April, in a call to repentance, and to remember to do that, COVID or no COVID, vaccine, no vaccine, whatever the case may be in the time we live in. Are we repenting and going and turning to God, and are we soaking up the grace that He's given us? And I pray that those watching this, hearing this, and part of it, that we wake up and we pray for our neighbors, for the people we don't know, and learn how to love each other like Jesus loved us.
That's great, Mike. And I'm going to follow up on that. Actually, you're touching on where I was going, which is this, that despite all of this, you know, and as we've tried to say a lot of times, you know, we're within the body of Christ, we're united by something that's different from this. But there are a lot of people in the world around us who maybe they don't belong to Christ, and their opinion on this can make us feel like they're on the other side of a great wall, and we can feel like they're our enemies. What did Jesus say to do with our enemies? Pray for them. And even if you feel like somebody in the church has made you feel like an enemy to them, or you feel like they are your enemy or whatever, well, I mean, if that's the case, if you're feeling that, first of all, remember who you are. But second of all, remember what Jesus said about enemies. Love your enemies. Pray for them. So I guess my parting word on this is pray for your neighbors, pray for your brothers and sisters in Christ, and pray for your enemies. That's what we need the most. Joey, I'll let you have the last word here.
You know, what I was thinking about was basically exactly what Ben said better than I could. I've intentionally not been watching the comments on this like you guys have. I've been relying on you to feed me kind of questions, but I kind of fear going back and looking at that after this. But I want to apologize if anything I said came across in a way that you know, grates on other people. I just want the last thing you hear from me to be that I'm at peace with you, right? And I'm just an idiot who is trying to look at what Jesus did and left me in the Bible and trying to apply that the best I can. I'm not a trained theologian, right? I'm just trying to figure it out just the same as everybody else. And I respect the fact that other people might come to some different opinions or conclusions and live a little differently in that context. So I hope that everybody understands that for me, from, you know, the context of everything I said tonight. And just remember, your doctor is your ally, right? And we really, really are doing this for you, right? And I'm sorry if sometimes the news is a little hard to hear and it's inconvenient, but we're just convinced that some of these things are the quickest way to get to the end of this, you know. And we have to make these decisions for these things to go in our own bodies or the bodies of our families. We're trying to keep our own families safe by subjecting our own selves to our guidance as well. We're just doing the best we can. And we do care about you. And hopefully we can keep our partnership good. All right.
Thank you for caring for people and for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for the work, Joey.
We really appreciate you joining us, Joey. And I think, you know, I think we all kind of feel that sense of a need for God's grace. And I really appreciate that you guys who've come to the table to share God's love, and especially Dr. Schumann, that you came to share your knowledge that God has given you. It's been a good thing.